Imagine it's the early 1960s, and you are working in a heavily male-dominated field. Now, the work that you're doing is really, really critical. It's the type of work that helps put a spacecraft into space. It's the type of work that helps figure out how to be the first country to orbit around the Earth. It's the kind of work that helps figure out, hey, how do we put some boots on the ground on the moon? I'm talking about a woman who was working for the department that would eventually become NASA, and her name was Katherine Johnson. And she was a mathematician who was responsible for calculating some really important calculations that actually was part of the Mercury and Apollo missions. And in fact, her calculations and the work that she was doing helped lead the U.S. into space and to put a man on the moon. In fact, her work was held in such high regard that in 1962, when John Glenn was getting ready to complete a mission to orbit around the Earth, Glenn specifically requested that Katherine Johnson run the calculations to ensure that they were accurate. Now, what's strange about this story, or maybe in fact not that strange, unfortunately, is that her work remained largely unrecognized outside of NASA for decades. It wasn't actually until much, much later in her life that she started to get the widespread acknowledgement and recognition that she deserved for the critical work that she did. Now, Katherine Johnson is just one of many pioneers who has gone on to be unrecognized in her time. And whether that's because of class distinctions or because of outright sexism or racism or just a really toxic environment, her story actually underscores the need for widespread recognition and visibility of our work. Now, I'm not saying that you are a woman working in the early 1960s in a heavily male-dominated, sexist field. I'm not saying that you're maybe someone who is facing extreme prejudice in the work that you do, but chances are your work, your career, the goals, the massive goals that you are working towards achieving, chances are that they will require in some way recognition for your work. And in this episode, we're going to talk about whether you should be investing in your personal brand or not. Whether you should be the leader who's out there getting the recognition that you deserve, or whether it makes more sense just to quietly work away outside of the limelight. And we're going to talk about all that and a whole lot more with today's guest, Ron Tite, who is the founder and CEO of an amazing marketing agency here in Toronto called Church+State. He's also the host and executive producer of a podcast called The Coup. And Ron is an award-winning advertising writer and creative director for some of the world's most respected brands. I want to welcome you to the How to Sell More podcast, where each week we dig into one of the 4 pillars of sales success, whether that's branding, marketing, sales, or customer experience. And we do that to help B2B leaders face the number one challenge that every company faces, and that's how to grow revenue. I'm your host, Mark Drager. Let's get into it. Ron, can I ask you, have you ever emceed a TEDx conference?
Yes, I did MC one.
Back in what, maybe 2017, 2018?
Oh, you think even way earlier than that? It was like in Waterloo, I think, or something.
Did you?
Yeah, something like that. But I'm not. It's funny because as a speaker, people are like, have you done a TEDx talk? I'm like, no. Because when you do a TEDx talk, to me, what you're telling people is like, yeah, I spoke once for free. And I don't speak for free. I don't play the TEDx lotto. Like, maybe this will go viral. Like, yeah, maybe, but that's a lottery ticket. And I get paid to speak. So I don't do it for free. Unless it's a not-for-profit organization or something like that.
Okay. And I love it. And I wanted to start there because you have these two sides of you. You are a speaker and an author, but you're also the founder of an advertising agency, a creative agency. And so I find that many people who are in the creative space on the advertising side, the marketing side, as a founder, as a CEO, as an entrepreneur, it tends to bleed over between this thought leadership, personal development. I'm going to have this personal brand. I'm going to write books. I'm going to speak from stage. I'm going to do this. And then you have the actual agency side. So if we were getting to know you better, are you a creative director and an ad guy first who happens to speak? Or is the speaking really taken over as the passion and the drive?
It's really funny because I had the same the same people asked me the same thing when I was in comedy, right? Like when I was doing full-time comedy, everybody go like, oh, so you just want to be a full-time comedian, don't you? Right? You just want to be a full-time comedian. And I go, no, I like hanging out exclusively with comedians is depressing as hell. And hanging out exclusively with ad people is depressing as hell.
I was going to say that because there's so much cynicism amongst
so much cynicism.
ad people, and you can't be excited about anything, right? Like
no. You got to play it cool. Got to be very cool.
Oh yeah,
that's why. And I don't speak to agencies a heck of a lot because they're way too cool to actually acknowledge another speaker. I think the best piece of feedback, the most memorable piece of feedback, spoke to an ad agency in like Milwaukee or something like that, and one of the points of feedback was his name should be Ron Tite. I was just like, brilliantly written, like great creative feedback. But it's like, we're too cool for this. But anyhow, to your question, I think I am both. That's not to skirt the question. I really enjoy they're not mutually exclusive. Like there's the part of thought leadership and speaking that I love is being able to test out thought, like read something, go, oh, this I think has an implication for somebody, and then kind of exploring that on stage and delivering it in a way that where people nod their head and go, oh yeah, well, yeah, that makes sense. And then coming into the agency and literally applying it, because if you don't have that application, then you're just talking theory, which is great for some people, but I like that I have an application lab every single day. And people call bullshit on my, the reality of the situation calls bullshit on the thinking that I shared on stage. And so it's this loop of getting better and smarter for your audiences and for your clients.
I thank you for sharing that. I love that because I have found the same thing. I own an agency as well. And I have found that my time in front of clients, my time in a boardroom doing, scoping or strategy or pitching or taking really hard feedback, or all of the conceptual stuff that I hear at conferences that I think of, that I jot down, that's on stage. And then you sit down with your team and they go like, how do you want us to actually make this thing real? And,
right.
and like we're up in the clouds and I'm like, oh, we can do all this stuff. And they're just like, yeah, but like, what does that actually mean? And how are we actually going to do that? And what are we going to do? And then we do it all. And it's like, oh, it should work, but it doesn't work. Or everything is actually a lot more chaotic and random than one might hope on the ad side and the marketing side. But I love what you said in terms of it makes you better on both sides. It makes you a better strategist, but a better operator as well. Yeah. Because you do have both things. Do you believe that CEOs, that leaders, that the heads of organizations should be more comfortable doing what you're doing, which is putting the thought leadership out there, creating the content, speaking from stage, being known? Or do you think we will look back at the 2010s and now in the 2020s and go like, that was a fad?
No, I don't think people should do it. I think people can do it. I think you need great thinking, you need biz dev, you need all the things that this situation has, but I don't know that CEOs should do it if they're not comfortable doing it or they're not passionate about doing it. Just like, a creative director should have equal parts, having a writing background and an art direction background and be able to kind of, coach both of those crafts.
They tend to come from one or the other, though.
But they kind of come from one or the other. And so what do you do? Like, well, what I do is I backfill with people who are much better from a design and art direction perspective. And I defer to them in some cases, not always, but
because you come from a positioning, strategy, copy side of things.
Yeah, exactly. And so so you need all those things, but CEOs don't do it if you don't want to do it. I think it's valuable to do it, but it doesn't have to be. There's more than, one way to skin a cat.
I guess what I'm saying is maybe it doesn't have to be the CEO, but does every organization in this world of authenticity and the drive to be more personal and humanistic, I don't even know if that's the right word. It sounded good.
Sure.
But should someone within an organization, let's say it's a medium to large organization, non-enterprise, not startup, not small business, but should there be a visible leader, or can a brand stand on its own?
No, a brand can totally stand on its own. A brand, I mean, you'll counter with, well, people like to follow people, and people like to hear from people. And
I
people
love how
like
you're like, all right, you're like, let me go 7 steps ahead in the argument. Yeah, cool. Let's just cut straight to the chase. What works?
Yes. So yes, the people, all those things are true. People do like to follow and interact and engage with people. That is true. But I don't know what's more authentic, like hiring a hired gun because you don't have anybody who's personable enough to do it, training somebody and having an internal salesperson, or having somebody that's the evangelist who is just out there doing their thing, but they have no actual operational role. Their only role is to do that thing. I don't know what's more authentic. I think a brand can stand on its own. I think a brand can produce content and thought leadership. And that was how I started the agency, was that I wrote this line that was, brands need to be media properties and media properties need to be brands. And if brands need to be media properties, they, if you go to Microsoft, I'm going all over the place here. If you go to Google, look, Google right now has more researchers and more people working in AI than any national publication. They have more researchers at their disposal to produce thought leadership. So who are you going to believe? An individual staff writer from the Globe and Mail, or Google as a brand who accesses all of the people that they have access to? I think you're
wouldn't most people say that they would actually trust, Jane Doe from the Globe and Mail than Google, that big evil brand?
Yes, in some cases, the critical part for brands is that they have to remove their sales bias, or at least acknowledge their sales bias. And that's, all of us have that. You and I have a sales bias in every interaction we have, and the traditional press. I think there's now a sliding scale of what that is, because there's so fewer eyeballs that are paying attention and consuming traditional media with its kind of journalistic integrity, and more people sliding into, influencer-based information. And I don't know, who do I trust more in that case? Do I trust Google, which is an enterprise, which will suffer by, whether in market share or brand reputation or something, by providing false information? Or do I trust an influencer who is being compensated by a brand, who themselves have a sales bias or is looking for more brand deals? So it's not, in 1980, yeah, that was a different world. Now it's a sliding scale. I don't think it's black or white anymore.
And if you're listening to this and thinking, this is all great, Mark, I'm not the leader of my organization. I'm in marketing, I'm in sales, I'm a team lead, maybe you're C-suite or an executive. The reason I bring this up is because actually, on an application level, affects all of us. I had a conversation a few weeks ago where we were looking at LinkedIn structuring, and we were having this very question about a small client, a small organization, with who within the organization should be showing up on LinkedIn under the brand of the organization versus a personal brand. And can you ask your employees to represent your brand? And should their entire image on LinkedIn be part of the brand property, or should it be unique and different? And if you were to invest in content or advertising or marketing to build up LinkedIn profiles on the personal side versus the corporate side, should you be doing that only with partners, only with people with ownership? Should you be doing that with employees? What if those employees leave? And so I think often people think of thought leadership as the founder, the entrepreneur, the CEO wants to go off and stand on stage and make a bunch of sales and feed their ego. But on the application side, I feel like this is a conversation that I don't know if there's a clear set of rules. With the work that you've done with huge organizations, Bell Media and CBC, and you've worked with Walmart Canada and DoorDash and Build and all these people, are these the types of conversations you're having at Church+State?
Yeah. We just finished an entire strategy for the president of Centennial, like how should the president
Centennial College. It's a local college here in the Toronto area.
Yeah. Of how should an executive have a personal brand, and how do they deploy that personal brand to represent the organization that they're employed for? So when it comes to a Church+State, first of all, I highly recommend to all our people that they invest in their personal brand, that they get out and they create content and they share content. and they have a perspective. Now, I want to ensure if they're doing it under the guise of a church and state employee, that whatever they share is consistent with our values and consistent with what we think.
Would you turn over like creative hours? Would you turn over agency hours to help them make stuff?
Yeah. I mean, I guess our clients are our priority. So there's always, I don't know what the breakdown would be in terms of utilization of whether it's, if we wanted them to do it, or somebody said, I want to do it, we would look to lighten their load in other ways, whether it's additional administrative things, but clients are the priority for me as well. I have a kind of an operationally efficient way of doing it, and my role is different, so my time is spent differently. But one, I think people should invest in a personal brand and should share that content and their perspective. They don't have to agree with me. Like, they don't think, if I say that a brand should do this, they don't need to agree with that. If it's coming from their personal profile. No, I want them to be completely authentic. They don't have to agree with me. From a value standpoint, though, they should be consistent with our values. And that's pretty important. Should they do it? Yeah. I think to lengthen their career. Now, what you said partway through was, what if they leave? And
there's that classic, like, well, what if they stay? Old line,
there's that. I know that our agreement with our employees is that we think that everyone deserves to be happy and fulfilled in life and at work. And if you are not happy and fulfilled while you're employed by Church and State, tell me. I will help you find another gig. I will. I don't want somebody who's unhappy. We are a certain type of agency with a certain type of clients for a certain type of people. And some people come, they're like, this isn't for me. Great. Thank you for telling me. I will find you another gig. And so do I limit their encouraging them to do personal stuff because I think they'll get too big and they'll leave? Well, if we can't offer them what they need to survive and thrive at work, they're going to leave anyhow. So I think our responsibility is to help people build their careers.
And so when you mentioned that you just worked through this with Centennial and the president and how does an executive create a personal brand, where did you land on this? Were there certain nuances, or is it just really get the message out, be authentic, be real, show some personality, and just consistency?
Well, we kind of take a very strategic, when you deal with people, it's very different. We work with a lot of executives and a lot of thought leaders and Olympians and things like that on personal brands. And it's, when you're going for just a brand, you can go with the full content calendar that kind of takes the strategic insights and the strategic priorities that brand needs to communicate and come up with a year-long content calendar at a top level. From a personal perspective, it's really different because, yes, you've got all those strategic priorities, but you have this other angle, which is, yeah, but I don't want to do that. Yeah, but I'm not comfortable doing that. Yeah, I disagree with that. Or that's not in my tone of voice. And so it really is a marrying of those two. Like, this is kind of what the academic side of what we think you should do. And then matching that with the personal side of like, I don't want to do that. Don't want to do it. That's not me. I want to do this, this, and this. And so it's just combining those two things together. But I think of most importance is that they drive it. It certainly has to be in their voice. And we didn't write stuff, or it was more kind of strategy and approach. So, he wanted to ensure that his message was being heard as many possible as possible. Why? Because he had responsibility to the college and he wanted to represent the college in the best way possible.
So one thing that I really admire about your agency is it appears to be, and I'm looking from an outsider point of view, but it appears to be pretty much 1 foot on the content side, 1 foot on the advertising side. And often when I'm sitting down with business owners, I have to spend quite a bit of time educating or explaining the difference between, say, a marketing agency, a content agency, social agency, performance marketers, and an ad agency. And often when people want to develop a really big campaign, really big creative, when they want to have really big placement, I say, you're looking for an advertising agency. You might be thinking marketing, you might be thinking, performance marketing, whatever, but you're really looking for someone on the ad side, on the advertising agency side, that huge idea, that big concept. And then often I see people going to advertising agencies for things that should be going to a marketing agency, a content agency, social media, or what have you. And so having been in this world, maybe I'm just slicing and dicing things a little too much. But in your mind, in 2024, what is the state of all of these different types of agencies? And how should those in the executive side of things, on the ownership side of things, on the operation side of things, how should they be thinking about their vendors and which type of agency is which?
I think clients can get too focused on tactics, and they hire agencies for tactics, and they think they want this, this, and this. So they go and they find an agency to do those things. And what they lose through it all is the strategic oversight that kind of connects all of it together. So I
think in their mind, though, theoretically, they're providing that strategic oversight.
Yes. Well, they're providing, and I think in a lot of cases, they're providing the operational oversight. But most wouldn't have a hand in strategy the way maybe they should, or the way they think they do. So I think what every brand needs is an operating system. And so it's here somewhere. That's the way we use think, do, say. And I was looking for the book,
and Ron's just mentioning his book, Think, Do, Say: How to Size Attention and Build Trust in a Busy, Busy World, a book that came out in 2019.
Yes. So I'm not just pitch slapping you with my book. We actually use.
No, I did that for you.
Thank you. Everyone else like pitch slap. And I hate when people do that. By the way, if you read my book, anyhow, the operating system we use is called Think, Do, Say, which in large part is based on the book, but the book is kind of, the corporate theater version of that, kind of what we call a brand operating system. And it really is, what do you fundamentally believe? What is your higher order purpose? Secondly, what do you currently do? And what else can you do to reinforce that purpose? And thirdly, how do you talk about it? And that's it. And how do you talk about it? It can be, if you do go through a customer journey, you analyze what are the things that you should say. Like, we do all this stuff in our consulting. But if you go, well, the big void here is that they don't know where to look for the right information. Sounds like maybe there's some trust issues, and maybe content is the thing that will help you kind of accomplish that goal. And so it's not every brand is the same. And some people need way more content than they need ads. And some people need way more ads than they need content. And what you should be concerned about is an agency who says, the only way to solve your problem is with nails, 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 and we're a hammer agency. And so we don't think it's that easy. And we've said to clients, we think you need to do this, and that's not really in our sweet spot. You should speak to these people because they're really good at that. So I think that's what we try and do. And if it's something that's not in our sweet spot, we can bring in somebody to help do it. But it's a collection of things. And the breakdown between content and advertising, this is why our agency is called Church+State. It's no longer the separation of content and advertising, the unification of Church+State, of content and advertising. And every single ad can be a piece of content if it's good enough. We've seen this. We've shared this shit. Like, we know we do countdowns and Super Bowl commercials and all that kind of stuff. We know this. Great ads can be content if they're good enough. We also know that great content can be an ad if it's authentic enough and responsible enough, that you can have a way of presenting content and saying, by the way, if you want more of this, come over here. So you can do both. It's just about the tone and the authenticity of how you do it, and being totally transparent when you're doing it. So I don't think it's as, I didn't even know, like when I started the agency and I had that line, man, brands need to be media properties and media properties need to be brands. Someone said, oh, that's content marketing. And I said, oh, that's a thing? I didn't even know that was a thing. Okay, yeah, it's that.
I had one of those moments because I had developed this whole methodology around what I called credibility hacking. And then I found out that apparently that's called authority marketing. Like I didn't even know that there are all of these. I was like, oh, okay. I call it credibility hacking, which I think is a much better name anyway.
It is a much better name. But tell me, because I'm probably going to disagree with you on it, but tell me your version of credibility hack.
So the first step is determining your objectives, your audience, and the market that you need to move into. So that way you can overlap who you are with, frankly, who you need to be. The second step would be, once you determine who you need to be, is start to work to show up that way, right? It's not a fake it till you make it, but we understand that when you show up looking a certain part or acting a certain part, or if you figure out that maybe you need to boost credibility by more third-party content or more testimonials or more awards or whatever it might be, there might be a hole in how you're showing up where the general public or people who are not in your world might go like, wow, you're amazing. But people who know might see through the chinks in your armor.
Yeah.
So what I try to do is try to analyze what that is, so that way you can show up with looking the part and with respect to those who do this all day, every day. And in that, you're going to develop your skill and your gaps and what have you. Then the next thing you're going to do is you're going to look at your ultimate target for what you want. You want the stage, you want the PR press, you want the client, like you want something, that pinnacle. And the gap between where you are and showing up not only good enough to be able to play in that space, but in a way that that person that you want to be able to respect looks at you as a peer, as opposed to someone a few levels below you. We need to close that gap. And the only way to close that gap is to ladder up. Now, the specifics of that laddering up will depend on that, whether it's the stage or the podcast, or like, you want to be sitting across from Oprah. You want to be getting that Academy Award. You want to be winning, you want to be winning Salesperson of the Year, whatever that is. There's going to be a gap where people who know what they're talking about are going to look at you like you're full of shit.
Right.
And so the goal is to start with the most achievable level, and then strategically move like step by step by step.
Oh, got it.
Up.
Okay.
And so this could be for building your portfolio if you're a service-based business. This like we do this all the time, right? It's that that not expecting to go from I'm getting the $5,000 contract to I'm getting the $500,000 contract, but you got to ladder up and you got to do it strategically and aggressively. And usually that's a combination of also spend. So that way, that there are certain vanity metrics, but those vanity metrics will help you. There are certain people where you might need an agent, or you might need a referral, or you might need a soft way in, but that will help you. And you can't go straight up. You have to usually do 5 or 10 steps. And so some people call that authority marketing. I look at it like, how do we get as quickly as possible to the level we need to be perceived at? So once we're in the right room with the right people, we can actually show up, and also hopefully imposter syndrome doesn't slow you down along the way.
Where I thought you were going with it is something I dislike. Like I did.
Oh, so I hope that means you like what I said.
Yeah. It seems to me, I like the incremental steps towards it, because there's too many people who are trying to gain the system of credibility, which is, I don't know how many a month. Hi, Ron. We're leaders of today magazine.
Oh, disruptors. Are you sure they're not disruptors?
Well, no, it's the people who are like, it's leaders of today magazine, and we've named you one of the top 10 leaders to follow in Canada. And for only $3,000, you can buy the front cover of the magazine. And I think that's bullshit. I think if you I think
Canadian Business Journal reached out to me I don't know, in 2009 or 10. And I thought it was a real thing at the time. I mean, not to say it's not a real thing. I don't know. I don't know much about their organization, if it still exists or not. But I was really pleased with myself until I found out what I would have to pay to participate.
Well, I did one. So I said to one once, I said, yes, I'm more than happy to do it. And they're like, amazing. Okay, great. We'll set up an interview and blah, blah, blah. And then I said, I want a veto on the headline. And they go, what? And I go, yeah, I want to write the headline for the article. And they go, okay. And I said, I want the headline to say Ron Tite paid for this article. And they wouldn't do it. Right? I think if we're truly leaders, then we need to be transparent about that. I just paid for this. The agencies, who say thanks to Strategy Magazine for including us in your what? You paid for it. You paid to be on the list. That's not credibility when you paid for something. And I think it's become very easy to get the hallmarks of credibility aren't what they were, but people are acting like they are. So, I did the last summer, I think I did one of the closing keynotes for the National Speakers Association in the US. I did it virtually. And I made sure that in my bio, they ended with, and he's the best-selling author of 2 books. Because, again, it's a room full of speakers. I said, who out there isn't a best-selling author? Nobody. We're all best-selling authors. Because Amazon has got the thing. If you come on Amazon, if you were like top book in your category for 10 minutes, you are an Amazon bestseller. So you go, I'm a best-selling author. Everybody said that. And so while we individually chased credibility, collectively, we destroyed it. Because what the very idea of a best-selling author means absolutely nothing now. It means nothing. Even to say I'm a best-selling author on this list.
Like, do you think that means nothing to the people in the know? Or do you think that that has eroded credibility amongst even the general public? Well, because so if you're a professional speaker, then your goal is to be able to either go through a bureau or go direct to the event planner or the organizer who's going to hire you, who's going to put you on stage. But what they care about is the event and the audience. The people in the audience who are sitting there for whatever reason, they've purchased a ticket, or it's their organization, or it's their AGM. The people sitting in the audience may still be impressed by the fact that you are a best-selling author.
They may be impressed for 15 seconds.
But this is where hopefully your skill backs up, which is why you got to ladder up, right?
Yeah. If there's a disconnect between the credibility you've established and your actual talent or expertise on stage, you're actually harming yourself by chasing that credibility. You're chasing credibility that you were a best-selling author on a particular list that you paid to be on. And so there's an expectation that you're going to be that type of person. And if you are not, then you've actually hurt yourself by chasing that credibility.
There's this amazing. Do you watch? Have you ever watched Modern Family?
Yeah.
There's this great episode in one of the later seasons. I don't know what it is, 6 or 7, where I think it's Catherine O'Hara comes in to play a guest spot, and she is the author of a book that I think is called something about like clean out your junk drawer. Yeah. And the idea is that they have all of the couples they have the couples on the show who are there, and they have a half day with her. They wanted a silent auction at a local like charity event, and she's going on, and it's just so painfully like thought leadership-ish. Yeah. Where she's like keeps referring to the junk drawer, and she keeps saying, clean out your junk drawer. And this is the process, and this is what we're doing. And she's trying to hold it all together as everybody freaks out around her because it's a comedy. But at the end, what I love the most, the punchline, was she finds out that the charity, the booking, was only $86. Right. And she's like, I've just given you a half day of my time. She's like, I am a trained psychologist. I've spent 30 years doing research and clinical studies, and I put everything I know and love into this book. And my stupid agent suggested that the junk drawer would help this sell better. And now I'm here spending a half day with you for $86. Oh, I'm out of here. And she takes off.
She's the perfect actor to play that role too. She's perfect.
And I love it though, because this is the truth, right? There are some people where I've seen it where it's just like, they're good at marketing, right? Come up with the junk drawer thing. And then they're just going to pump out a book, and they're going to sell a book, and it's full of all the old stuff, the same old stuff. And then there are these expert professionals who've dedicated a life to it, who step into this world, who put everything they know into this book, and then they find themselves doing the free TEDx talk or doing the $86 half day.
Well, it's not to say, Seth Godin had a great point on this around, like, it's not that approach sometimes doesn't work. It's just now you have to look in the mirror and know that you're the person who uses that approach. And I'd rather not be that guy. I'd rather kind of, build my credibility through the work I've done and the stuff I've written. Now, does that mean I just ignore marketing? No. The main tenets is that true growth comes from other people adopting our ideas. That's where growth comes from, whether it's in personal growth or whether it's in the growth of your business. When other people adopt your ideas and your passions. Well, how do they do that? Well, it depends on how you communicate it. And we know that stuff that is branded in a way that is consistent and concise and maybe clever or memorable, that or using story or metaphor, like all those things help us deliver our message in a way that other people get it, understand it, integrate it. And so we are more effective by having a part of our brain being a marketing brain. We do need that stuff.
So final question for you, Ron. I ask this of most people who I have on the podcast, and I typically end with 2 questions, but I want to hit you with this one. In 2024, with everything that you know and everything that you've done, what would be your recommendation to help us sell more?
I think it's stay focused and be ready to pivot. We don't know what this year is going to bring. We still don't kind of know. In that, are we going to hit a soft recession or we're not going to hit a soft recession? We got, at least in this country, we have a housing crisis. We have south of the border. There's going to be an election, in 1 year's time. We don't know where interest rates are going to go. So there's a lot that's really up in the air. And things are, I don't think we're in a recession per se, but we're in kind of a hesitant or a tentative kind of business cycle where people are like,
haven't we been in a pretty soft market since like 2017 or 18, though, it feels like? Like, it feels like there's always something on that horizon to scare people.
I don't think so. I think it's been really since about 2022, since like the housing interest rates or since mortgage rates and interest rates have gone up, and we've been in this. I think it's ever since we've been in kind of the hyperinflation environment where then interest rates were needed to increase to bring inflation down. And when that happens, we know that housing is affected, and then it's a trickle effect. So yeah, I think it's the inflation environment that has really done it. And I think we've managed it. Kudos to all levels of government who've had a hand in that. I think we've done pretty well considering where we were. So because of that, from a sales standpoint, you need to be hyper focused on what are the problems that your client is currently facing. Because if they've got reduced budget, because people haven't given them the budget that they need to do what they need to do, they're not going to be buying your wares. Is it, it's the difference between, are people buying homes or are they renovating homes? So if you're in sales, like maybe there's a way of like, instead of selling the new widget, is there a way to add on software as a service that you can increase value on the widget, or you can polish the widget, or you can consult on the widget? So what do you do in an environment where spend is tentative? And I think the best way to do that is to look at the problems that your clients are facing and how do you solve them?
Okay, that was my talk with Ron Tite. To wrap things up, I'm going to share with you my 3 biggest takeaways from the talk. And don't go anywhere, because after this, I want to hear from you. Okay, number 1, you should focus on your personal brand. I think that was made clear. But you need to do it in a really strategic way, because investing in your brand, while if you're at a manager level, if you're at an executive level, a C-suite level, if you are responsible for people knowing you and liking you and trusting you, if you hope to have any influence over anyone outside of your immediate circle, your personal brand is that. So I think we have all agreed that this is an important investment, but one that you need to do strategically, one that's based on authenticity, one that's based on passions, one that's based on skills. What can you say the way you need to say it, for the reasons you need to say it, in a way that is different from everyone else? Number 2, there is this massive balance between creativity and strategy in your personal brand, in your company, in business in general. And really the easiest way to focus this, because it can feel a bit overwhelming, is just focus on strategic problem solving. Focus on the specific problems that the people in your world face and offer them advice or a tailored solution to overcome those problems. And number 3, depending where you are in the organization, how senior you are, or whether you have ownership or whether you're an employee, you have to figure out whether it's going to be a personal brand exercise or more of a company representation. There's neither a right nor is there a wrong, but we of course have to understand that if you're an employee and you're representing the company, one day they may ask you to leave. Or one day they may really fuck everything up and do a bunch of terrible things, and now you are connected to them. Equally, if you are a business and you're investing in your team's personal brand, they may choose to leave. They may choose to walk away. So there is no right or wrong answer to this. But what I will say in my experience is most companies are far too conservative. It's that old line, what if we invest to train our staff and they leave? And then the other person says, what if they stay? It's the same thing. What if we invest in our employees' brand? What if someone who's working for a company, what if you choose to invest your personal brand into your parent company and it goes separate ways? The way I look at it is everything is temporary and everything is for now. right? People change, brands change, companies change, times change, markets change. Everything is temporary. So rather than worry about what might happen one day, let's just make hay while the sun is shining. Let's make the most of the opportunities we have today, knowing that 12 months, 18 months, 24 months from now, hey, things can change, we can adapt. No one's paying that close of attention to you anyway. And if you give a really good story and a reason behind the change, they will totally accept it. So make the most of what you can now and worry about the rest later. Now, those were my 3 takeaways from this talk, but I'm curious what yours were. Do you agree with me? Maybe you've got something you want to argue with me about. I would love to hear from you. Either way, be a part of the conversation by heading over to LinkedIn and sending me a direct message. Now, my name is Mark Drager. I'm the guy in the black and white photo with the little blue background on LinkedIn. And now while you're over there, be sure to connect with Ron Tite. You can get a copy of his book, Think, Do, Say, How to Seize Attention and Build Trust in a Busy, Busy World. You can listen to his podcast, The Coup. I pronounce it Coup. Maybe it's Coop. And of course, you can learn more about Ron's work over at rontite.com. Now, one last thing. If you've made it this far into the show, you really should subscribe. And here's why. Every single week, I share practical strategies and tips, just like what Ron and I talked about today, to supercharge your business growth, your career, your sales, your marketing department. Everything tied to your company and life will get better if you subscribe to this podcast. I think there's a little asterisk here because my lawyers are probably going to say, one of those like things at the end of a pharmacy commercial, a drug commercial, right? How to sell more may not actually blah, 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 blah. No. Anyway, I really think you should subscribe. We put our hearts and souls into this podcast, and we want to drive as much value as we can for B2B leaders in the sales and marketing space. So with that, my name is Mark Drager, and I will catch you in the next episode.